What's your website?
As Jim has said virtually everything I was going to say, I'm going to focus on what's left, what the small, and perhaps making the same points about the GEA, but also trying to say what I think a lot of people in the UK working on this policy for 20 years. I started privatising in power gen in the late 90s, and I did my stint in government, and now I'm outside government. The community I work with, a lot of people like Walt here and others have urged a systemic, long-term, sustainable viewpoint on energy for a long time. And those of you who've worked on policy have found it a pretty roller coaster ride, and the question is why? And are we getting out of that period? And what do we learn from both the political and institutional context of these policies? The policies have been around for a long time. The question is, why haven't they been done, and what are the broader context? So that's what I'm going to talk about. So you can't, as far as I'm concerned, understand anything that's happening, including in the energy bill, without studying the history of UK policy and economic context, because it's not because we didn't know the right things to do, to be honest. We weren't lacking in policy advice. It was the context. That we are on the verge of being transformational in quite a lot of the areas we need to be. We've moved from the era of targets to the era of focusing on policies to really digging into economic, political and institutional, even constitutional change. We're changing the DNA of how this part of the economy and our societies work, and that is really quite fundamental. No one said this in front because it would have scared everybody else off, but now we're nearly at the end. I think we can be honest about what we're trying to do. Yes, I know. Yeah. But we have critical challenges around areas like energy efficiency and finance, and I'd say particularly infrastructure and innovation, which I'd like to talk through. So the historical context is we have a generation of policymakers and businesses and regulators who are brought up with three shibboleths: deregulate markets, don't pick winners, internalise external costs through things that look good in environmental economics textbooks, like I used to teach, a bit, not completely, only a bit, and that'll make things work. A focus on cost reduction, not delivery of strategic public goods. That is the British way, or has been for 20 years. And that left us with a key legacy in the political class, in the administrative class, and the regulatory class about a way of looking at the world, which was very bad, very good at doing what it said it was going to do. It reduced costs, it sweated assets, it provided consumer choice, it lowered prices. Then we changed what it was trying to do. We said so the goal, which was reduce costs, suddenly changed to reduce costs, maintain security of supply, achieve massive decarbonisation transformation, but it wasn't put like that then. And it turned out that lots of the things we needed to do that task, our culture of decision making was very poor at. It was very poor at innovation. It was very poor at managing risk and acknowledging risk. It was very poor at setting strategic intent. And that was not because we didn't have clever academics. It's because of the way we think about problems. And so, having gone through this process from 2002, where we started to look as part of the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, and joined the end of this process, the Prime Minister said we need new energy policy. And for everybody who says there isn't energy policy, there has been. And that's because our oil and gas is running out, and there's this climate change thing we've got to respond to. So it wasn't irrational, it was very rationally driven. And we had a UK target for decarbonisation, which was 60% reductions by 2050. That was then changed by the Climate Change Committee, which no one noticed, to 95% domestic reductions by 2050, which was based on an analysis of reducing the risk of climate change, of 4-degree climate change. So people don't read it, but so actually it was a very strong logic behind a very, very ambitious transformation, which has changed over time. And again, got to realise that UK action always has to be seen in the context of it was part of a diplomatic strategy to drive cooperation through not just UNFCCC, and there's never been a UNFCCC only strategy, for a much broader set of cooperation and drivers, and the straw man of the kind of carbon budgets is always put up there. But actually, you can FOI the papers if you don't want to see the Gleneagles preparations I was involved in about technology agreements and working with China. This was part of, if we do it and show it can be done and deliver the technologies in Europe and the UK, that's what's going to drive transformation. And yes, then we put the cherry on top with the agreement to make it go faster and harder. And the funny thing about the UK, we were the only country who really drove this from a sense of climate risk without a strong industrial policy element, a strong political element like the nuclear issue with the Greens in Germany. And actually that's one of our problems, because actually the problems about getting to where we are today, which I think is a good place, has been fighting with Treasury and less DTI biz. Over a conception of what's right economically, over a conception of what the role of government is, on a conception of is it worth buying. Treasury is a follower, not a leader. It never bought and never has bought the UK's diplomatic strategy. as if that's your position, you will always say, let's wait. Let's wait to set the 2030 decarbonisation target till after the international agreement in 2015, as we've got in the energy bill. So, rather than assuming that people in government are stupid, we should realise this is about a fundamental structural fight, which is partly political and partly intellectual and cultural inside UK government. But I think the reason we've actually, I think, just about to break out of that, some interesting things. So Jim's talked a lot about some of the elements we've got now, but again, we've moved to the point of thinking we just set the prices right and things will happen automatically, because we tried that and it didn't work. I mean, there is a part of the world that set a carbon price that's called Europe. UK has got a carbon floor price. None of the modelling says it will shift investment until the end of 2030. We're talking about getting markets right now, which I think is a much more holistic, systematic view, which backs up GEA. We've got long-term strategic intent now for the Climate Act and the Climate Change Committee. That's a constitutional change, like the Monetary Policy Committee. It sets certainty over time. That's driven a roadmap inside DEC that actually looks holistically at, can we get enough biomass? Can we get enough water? Can we actually do this? And came up with the fact that we had to decarbonise the power sector and do efficiency very strongly. It did a systematic analysis. We've got actually a very sophisticated adaptation and security response to climate change as well, another holistic viewpoint. And we've taken that through this energy bill, which we've talked about, and through issues moving into the North Sea and North Sea grid, accessing resources. The only place we have an industrial policy is around offshore wind, pretty much. But actually that's driving quite a big change. And energy efficiency. We've also invested in deep changes on delivery. Our current structure of infrastructure finance through the Green Investment Bank, infrastructure guarantees, Infrastructure UK is radically different from 5 years ago and would have been unacceptable for all the major parties 5 years ago as too interventionist. But needs must, and the financial crisis means to get infrastructure out of the door, the government is basically saying what's going to get built and guaranteeing the finances of it. That's it. The energy bill does some of it, but UK guarantees is as big. Planning, we've reformed completely. Differently, I'm not quite sure where it's landed, but we've moved planning. The places we haven't is efficiency and innovation policy. And I think I can finish on that is that we need a better European strategy and global strategy to deliver the context we do all this work in. But we are at a point where if you want to get investment in the UK, as the CBI says, you've got to complete the low carbon transition. There is no plausible way you could take away climate policy and get investment in the UK. There's no pathway to a lignite power station or a coal power station in the UK. So we need to complete our transition, and that really means risk managing the cost and risks around it, and that's efficiency. Efficiency buys you that risk management. Understanding why we shouldn't build too much gas now is part of risk managing that transition. Investing in innovation is a clear part of that, and sending the right signals to investors. And those are the pieces of the system which we need to turn up. But essentially, I think most of the structure's there. It's how we use it to actually drive to the next level. And then it won't just turn from a kind of decarbonisation project. I think we'll actually get enormous amounts of economic growth and export potential out of it as well. And we need to start focusing on that and making this a bit more of an opportunity story and less a fight between DEC and the Treasury, which is kind of unedifying for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.